Hello, and welcome to the Balance and Blissful Energies podcast. My name is Dr. Elizabeth Hechavarria, and I'm happy to have my guest Chris Mulgeri with us today. Coach Chris Mulgeri is the Director of Wellness at the Synergy Center, a martial arts coach and movement educator who helps busy humans build strength without strain. At the Synergy Center, he leads practical coaching on low impact strength, mobility, breathwork, and nervous system regulation, an important
Mhm.
topic for me, as you all know, turning small daily reps into sustainable routines. Chris is known for calm, clear teaching, minimum effective dose training, and tools couples and families can use to co regulate and reconnect. His approach is simple: move well, breathe better, recover on purpose, and let discipline feel kind. Chris, welcome to the Balanced
Thank
and
you for having
Blissful
me.
Energies podcast.
I appreciate being here.
Yeah. So give us a little background about how you entered into the world of martial arts and why you want to share this with the people now.
Sure. So the elevator pitch would be, my parents, when I was young, my parents separated, and which was odd for the early 70s. I ended up living with my father, who was, of course, working, trying to support my brother and I. And I would wait for him to go home, and we would watch on Channel 20 in Metro Detroit on TV, the Chinese theater, Chinese Kung Fu theater, and all those really crazy Kung Fu movies from the 70s and 80s later on. And that kind of became a little bit of a ritual for us. And I got interested in martial arts because that was my kind of my kind of time and connection with my dad, right? So we would that watch that. We would watch some like horrible westerns or nights, so anything. That just became something we did. I just wait up for him. We'd watch a little bit, and then he'd carry me to bed. And so the martial arts stuck, right? And then in Michigan, there wasn't a lot of martial arts where I was. We eventually moved back to Connecticut, and this was the time of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle craze. The comic books came out. So this is all like early times in the martial arts world, right? To find something was a little more challenging. I started off at a YMCA course learning a form of Okinawan karate, which was really fun. And then it's sort of just, it stuck. So I would go to the library, get the books, try to fake learn like I was, out of the books. And eventually, when we moved back to Michigan, I was able to train. I trained in the Okinawan style and received my black belt through high school. And then when we moved back to Michigan, I was able to meet up with those who would be my current sort of mentors in more of a cross training system of martial arts. So I started getting involved originally because of the interest from the magazines in Filipino martial arts. It's a lot of weaponry training. It's really interesting stuff, but I think a little underrepresented in the martial arts community at the time. You have karate, you have kung fu, you have taekwondo. It's very popular, wonderful martial arts. But when I saw that, I was like, wow, this is something I haven't seen before. I'm kind of interested. I was able to find who is my current mentor, David Hatch. He lives in Canton, Michigan. Contributive martial arts, wonderful man. And then it started going from there. So started training in the combat sports, Muay Thai, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And then I was at the university at the time by this point. And then, so I graduated with a biology degree, but I was already hooked. I knew what I wanted to do. At that time, my focus was more creating training partners for us to grow together because I had no one to train with, right? And then it eventually became, I would train competitors. I was competing myself, so I'd train competitors, but not everybody wants to do that, right? That's a certain path for a certain group of people. Other
Mhm.
people want a great hobby. So as I started to see what people want, I find that martial arts, you can sort of guide people down a direction. Even if they're doing the same art, they can do it with a different focus, a different intensity, and it can be useful to a lot of different people in a lot of different ways, right? I found that while I at one time was pretty competitive and like to do those events, 90% of the people in my students in my studio, they had no interest. So it was a very fascinating thing. And then what happened? We got married, we moved to Alaska, and my wife and I created a rehabilitative martial arts program. She was the lead psychologist at the pain clinic at the J Bear Air Force Base in Anchorage, Alaska. And we found a way to use the martial arts as a rehab tool, right? So people with lower back injuries, issues with walking, and then maybe connectivity issues with their partners in some fashion. So we would take some of the more traditional arts, the what we refer to as traditional arts anyway, the Filipino martial arts work well when if somebody's seated in a chair and they can't move or in their wheelchair, we can train the stick work together in a very cooperative manner, developing a newfound connection, right, with the body, right? Learning movement patterns that you've never seen before. You didn't think you can do, but now that you can do them, we can grow into some other things, right? One of the interesting things to me, especially in some of the more traditional arts, the Kung Fu that we do, the Filipino and Indonesian arts, is you will find a lot of people do it later in life, right? They're still doing the art pretty much the same way they did in their 20s, 30s, 40s. They're doing it in their 60s, 70s, and 80s, more or less, right? You don't see a lot of highly competitive 80-year-old jujitsu people, right? Every once in a while, and it's happening more and more because of a better recovery, better education, better diet. You will see in what we a more mature athletic representation. We have, I'm in my 50s. I'm competing people in their 60s, in their 70s. But the pool of I'm sorry, the pool of people is a lot less, right? But in
Mhm.
the Indonesian martial arts, you see people practicing well into advanced age, and it's a pretty neat thing, right? You can really see how the art can carry you through time as you change. It will change with you, right? So maybe at one time you're kind of rough and tumble, and you're thinking, I want to do all these things, but maybe later in life you're thinking, I just want to move, right? I just want to
Mhm.
move smoothly. So if I'm doing the dance forms of the Indonesian silat, I'm practicing a martial art in a way that's useful to me when I'm older, right? And now for
Right.
me right now, it's important because that's a big recovery thing for me. So if I'm training jujitsu with a bunch of 30-year-olds and they're, these big athletic dudes, I need a way for my body to recover effectively so that I can do that again, right? So we have to be
Yeah.
very mindful of what the art is and where we are in our stage of life to make that balance.
Yeah. Wow, that's really, I mean, I think it's something, I don't know that it's unique to you, but it's very cool that you have this palette of different martial arts techniques that you can use with your clients and
Hmm.
teach depending on what is needed. And I think what drew me to you in the first place to invite you on was the connection between like being aware of the energy body and really being into the physical body, like making the connection between the two and the mind and applying like, yeah, these different forms or these different styles of movement that have been
Hmm.
developed over, in some cases, thousands of years, and teaching them in a modern way that is now you just mentioned to me
Oh.
before we started recording, you're teaching this online. Can you yeah, how does that work?
So obviously, pre and post COVID, a lot of us we had issues teaching, right? Because you
Yeah.
can't be in person. But what happened for me was slightly different because we've moved several times. I was born in Connecticut, moved to Michigan, back to Connecticut, back to Michigan. When I got married, we moved to Alaska for a number of years, and then we were
Mhm.
living on Long Island in New York, and then now we're in Florida. So I would teach a little bit, and then certain opportunities would open us for us up as a family or for my wife's work. So we would relocate. And what ended up happening is I'd have a few people that I'm training and they want to keep training. In the case of in Alaska, it is a fascinating place to live, right? I mean, if certain events in our life had been different, we'd still be there, right?
Mhm.
However, martial arts is a little underrepresented, right? I mean, just in terms of population, you have a vast place with a relatively small population. So they want to keep training. So they have a little bit of experience in the beginning. Certain arts, for certain reasons, translate really well to online practice. So if you have a training partner, I can pretty much teach you anything, right? I can teach you jujitsu. I can teach you everything. If you have a small enough, a decent space and a willing training partner, we can do almost any martial art, right? But if maybe the goal is more the kung fu or it's movement or recovery or something like this, I can still monitor you online. I can give you corrections. We can have discussions because we're doing the same thing we would do in class, just in a virtual setting. And what we can do is what it demands is the participant, my students, be more focused on their own individual training. Right.
Mhm.
And that's also a good thing, right? There's a little bit more responsibility. Sometimes what happens is people will get used to coming to class. Okay. So as we're saying, certain forms lend themselves better to a virtual setting than others. if you don't have a partner, I can show you a lot of motion and exercise for jujitsu, but ultimately that is very interactive. But if your goal is, I want to feel better, I want to have more balance, I want to have more energy, I want to vitalize a little bit, then you can learn, for example, the entire Wing Chun Kung Fu system by yourself, right? Now,
Mhm.
is it effective for self-defense? Probably not, because you need somebody to interact with to learn things like timing and distance and spatial relationship, things like that. But if your goal is to understand your body, understand the energy systems of your body, make your body feel better, make your body move better. So if your goal is recovery or wellness and perhaps a little bit of a introspective journey, if that's the
Mhm.
goal, then yeah, we can basically do that, because then what we're talking about is what is your experience with the art. So we can talk about how to connect the focal point, right? So when I'm doing a form, I might have somebody, when they're doing the form, I might have somebody put a candle on the other side of the room, right? And then as they're doing their form, working on connecting, their vision focuses on the candle. So I want them to feel the movement of the body and then imagine themselves breathing in and out, and like breathing in the energy of the candle and breathing out to the candle. So they get a focal point, right?
Mhm.
If you're doing some of the Filipino martial arts with the weaponry work, we have an endless array of weaponry forms and exercises that you can practice either on a bag, like if you have a heavy bag or some kind of surface you can hit a little bit and not worry about getting beat up. We have a lot of the formal aspects, the forms, the exercise you can do just to engage with your own body. That's kind of neat because um it's a lot more mental, right? You have to think about where the weapons are moving, not hitting yourself, how to move comfortably, right? Now, these are things you may never apply in a combative sense, but if that's not your goal, then we can do whatever, right? In my time, VHS was coming out, so we were, a lot of us were learning off VHS tapes and other things. That's pretty much the same thing, but now we have interactivity. I can help offer corrections, I can guide some ideas. If we're talking about what should my breathing be like, what should my focus be like, right? I'm feeling these sensations, I'm feeling these positively or negatively, these things in my body. What am I experiencing? We can have those conversations, right? If
Well,
I
I wonder, sorry, you just mentioned, because sometimes your clients may feel something in their body, certain experiences. Do you have like, for example, I'm more familiar with yoga and
Mhm.
Pilates, more feminine
Okay.
body
Mhm.
styles, that certain emotions might get triggered, like
Absolutely.
maybe something that's stored in the body, or do you have that experience also with the martial arts, and how do you help a client move through that?
Yeah, so anything physiological, we talk about the mind body spirit connection a lot, but as far as I'm concerned, it's just one thing, right?
Yeah.
It's just compartmentalizing what we experience as, this is my mind, this is my body, this is my spirit. But that's a way to focus on a particular aspect of the whole, right?
Mhm.
So anytime you're doing something, you're affecting everything, right? I don't think there's any way around that, right? Even if
I
I'm
fully agree.
sitting and
Yeah.
I'm doing the breath work, right? Then I may be experiencing something that I wasn't ready for, prepared for. Like one of the meditations teachers that I work with, if you don't cry during meditation, you haven't meditated enough, right? Because you're not going deep enough to connect with the kind of things that are sitting in you. No, a lot of times it's very, very, very similar, right? You may find some frustrations, you may find some angers. Frustration is a big one I think it's more surface level because, am I doing the form right? I can't seem to get this move down or something. But it's a good thing to have and to realize, because we're going to be frustrated about something every day, right? So it's just a mirror to your everyday life, right? If I'm practicing a
Mhm.
form and I'm not quite getting the idea down, then we can talk about why that is. If I'm practicing the form and I'm getting anger or I'm getting sadness, all right, why are those things coming to me, right? We work in a non-judgmental way and try to realize, what is that mind body spirit trying to tell me, right? There's something that my body's trying to tell me that is unresolved, perhaps, right? So I don't
Mhm.
think of yoga, Pilates, the things we do in jujitsu, the things we do in any of the other arts, right? We have in the Indonesian system, we have a lot of exercise practices that, to an untrained eye, you would think we were doing yoga, right? It's a little
Okay.
different in here and there, but ultimately we all have our way of letting the body move. And the more time you spend, I find, especially more slowly and more reflectively, right? I'm thinking about what I'm doing, then you're more likely to engage a deeper connection, mind, body, spirit connection. But also, I think you will uncover the things that perhaps you are leaving under the surface, right? Things maybe you're not addressing in your life, your
Mhm.
frustrations, your pains, your angers, right?
Mhm.
I think because most people work superficially on the arts, that they don't get really deep into that. But sometimes people will find I'm training and then I just kind of break down and I don't know why, right?
Mhm.
Or training with a weapon work, it can be pretty physical if you get yourself into it. So you just might find like I've got some built up tension and aggression, but that's also a way to express it and release it into a form where you're not hurting yourself or anybody else, right? So that
Yeah.
works out really, really well. And sometimes it's the act of working to a little bit a level of exhaustion. It doesn't matter what modality, right? You can get tired doing yoga, you can get tired punching the heavy bag, right?
Yeah.
You can work yourself to a certain level, but sometimes you need to get the body tired enough. And I'm not saying you have to run marathons. Certainly not something I would do, but if you're into that thing, more power to you. But you got to get your body tired enough to almost let your body get out of the way so you can experience what the other things are in your body,
Mhm.
right? In a very practical way. For example, a lot of times when we're training competitors, when we're training fighters, we'll go for the run first. We'll do the calisthenics, get the body kind of a little bit tired so that you have no choice but to rely on your form, your technique, and create power in this case with less effort, right? Right. We want to create power, but not force it. Right. So that's
Mhm.
why you see many times you see rather slight, rather they don't have to be bodybuilder individuals being able to hit hard and run well and do very athletic things because they've gotten out of their own way and they're using their body entirely as opposed to focusing on the muscular system, for example, right?
Mm.
Sometimes we got to wear that system out a little bit and get it
Yep.
out of the way so that we can learn how to move more effectively. Sometimes we have to do it to learn how to breathe more effectively. Sometimes we have to learn to focus more effectively or maybe release some of those inner demons that we didn't even know were haunting us.
Mhm. So what you've described, is kind of like allowing yourself to get into the flow
Yes.
of like, yeah, like getting the mind out of the way is one aspect. You said
Hmm.
getting the muscle, maybe it's like that tension, that
Hmm.
aggressive
Sure.
tension that you're holding in your body that it's like, okay, so run it out or whatever. And then you can really allow yourself to get into the forms. And that's interesting because just in reflecting in my experience of doing yoga, like, it should be like you're in a state of, y a flow and calm and
Yes.
everything, but that's
Hmm.
not always the case. It depends on what you've been doing beforehand. And sometimes, and especially in a more, like flow, yoga flow kind of movements where you're going rather quickly from one to the other,
Hmm.
I've found that if I'm into it, I've hurt myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
I overdo it.
For
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. And so a couple things that I thought about as you were discussing. First I want to talk about working with a partner. When you did mention in your writing to me that you help couples co-regulate. Can you go into that a little bit? Like how can couples train together to help each other co-regulate? I'm really curious about
Sure.
that.
Well, again, goal dependent, right? In my school, if I have people come in partners, right? It doesn't matter in what setting, right? It could be a father son, it could be husband wife, could be any variety. I usually will separate them and sort of say, okay, I want to work with you, get you to understand the art independently of your partner, and then you guys can work together, whatever that means. Because sometimes when people come together, one partner, they may not have the same level of interest in what we're doing. Somebody wants to
Mhm.
do jujitsu and the other person, oh, okay, I'll try it. That's not the same level of interest, right? So what I want to do is gauge their level of interest and see where they're at. If people come
Mhm.
for the express purposes of working together, using the martial arts as a tool in the relationship, that's a different story, right? So we have a lot of exercises in the intimate partner coaching program that my wife and I developed. As a psychologist, she takes the psychological approach. We have kind of woven this in together because what we'll do is there are many exercises in martial arts that are cooperative and they are based on what we call contact reflexes, right? So
Mhm.
tactile reflexes, right? So It may be simple as if we're facing each other and we touch palm to palm, one person is moving their hand and the other person is just following them. And then when they switch together, it's a way of to read each other's intentions, to read each other's energy, and
Mm.
reconnect and get used to each other again, right? And what you find is sometimes, right, if one partner is a little more competitive, they take this as a game, right? It's not really a game. It's supposed to be nonverbal communication. And are you listening to me? And then when we switch, am I listening to you? So if we do something very simple where they're just touching palm to palm, fingertip to fingertip, and then we're just sort of flowing, I want to see that if I change direction, do you get stuck before you come back with me? Or do you smoothly pay attention and flow with me? Right. Those
Mhm.
kind of exercises, they really connect because what you'll find is the breath work of the two partners kind of syncs up a little bit when they're really getting into it. Obviously, the mind body connection is there. And then sometimes it'll be eyes closed so that what you're trying to do is sort of merge those two energies together so it becomes one. And then when they're
Mhm.
flowing together, they remember time when maybe they were doing that naturally and they weren't training about it. But
Mhm.
we do everything in life is training, right? We would not survive from infancy unless we mimicked how to walk and learn how to tie our shoes. We as a human animal, we have to train to do things, right? And sometimes we forget about these things. Everything we do is skill acquisition, right? If I want to be a better father, I have to get new skills. If I want to be a better husband, I have to get new skills. A better partner, I have to get new skills. The idea of naturally gifted people, yes, people have certain attributes, but if you don't cultivate them, you're not going to get as far as maybe you could otherwise, right? So those
Right.
are really good. And then we can get a little bit more formal if the couple enjoys it and we find this is beneficial, right? Some couples, it's easier to get into this with very simple, almost non-martial arts looking exercise, right? Especially if one of the partners is a little less convinced, right? When there's a physical size dynamic that can also change, right? So I don't want anybody to feel like, oh, my husband, my partner, my wife, whatever is overpowering me just because they're larger. So the idea is that we'll start with something simple. Then there's a series of exercises that are cooperative. They're rhythmically based. Often you'll hear the term sticking hands in Kung Fu, where we're making connection and we're moving. Tai Chi has what they call push hands. The Wing Chun, we have the sticking hand exercise. In the Filipino martial arts, we have what they call higot hubad lubad, which is a tying and connecting drill, right? But you can
Mhm.
take them in a very soft, kind of meaningful approach, and you can start to, in a sense, physically read your partner's intentions, read what they're trying to tell you, and then you can play little games with it and see, hey, are you really listening or are you not listening, right?
Mhm.
We have the same thing when we work with the partners in various dance forms, right? If we're teaching the Argentine tango or something, one partner will just stand, the other partner will put their hands on their chest, and all I'm going to do is walk forward and walk back, and you're going to match my steps, but I'm not holding you in a frame, right, in an embrace to give you that extra stimulus to tell you. You have to connect with me to see, right? Are you really paying attention to me or are you not, right? And
Mhm.
then the interesting thing is what we have found, this is slightly anecdotal in a sense that we haven't had a huge, 1,000-person study on this, but it tends to be people when you get into the regular practice, what I mean is 5 minutes a day. This is not a huge commitment in your life, but it can improve the commitment to your partner, right? So if
Mhm.
you're doing these kind of things, there seems to be an innate sense of I'm able to see my partner's posture. All right. I can see how their posture changes. I can understand where they're at in the moment, and I can respond with something that maybe is a little more effective than I might otherwise. Right. So, especially in terms of conflict, I can connect with my partner just by putting my hands on them, right? I can kind of feel where they're at, they can feel where I'm at. So that's a really interesting one because we can take a martial arts tool, which at the end of the day, everything we're doing is meant to, it's meant to do something to somebody else in a different way. But we can repurpose that tool to have a completely separate result, right? And
Mhm.
that's been very, very effective, right? Sometimes you see in the partnering that my wife will do, people sit across from each other and they just maintain contact and they try to match each other's breathing, right? Or they sit back to back and just try to feel that energy moving up and down the spine, all right, with your partner. But these are, I would rather people take 5 minutes a day and do it every day, then do it once a week for a half an hour, right?
Mhm.
Daily consistent practices is what's going to get you better results faster, right? Um, and those kind of
Yeah.
things can improve the communication. And then maybe you'll say, okay, well, the physical communication is working very well. What do we have to do in our verbal communication? Right. And usually that's when my wife that's usually that's her gig, right? That's where she
Yeah,
will.
yeah, yeah. But I think, this is a really interesting approach. I hadn't ever considered it actually. It's like to use martial arts in a way it's really not martial. It's about like
Mhm,
marital. It's about
absolutely.
bringing the two energies together to a more harmonious state. And you're doing it through reading each other's energy. And ideally, when that's working really well, then the verbal becomes a confirmation of what you've already started to feel on the energetic level. And you can go deeper and yeah, sounds
Absolutely.
nice. Yeah. Yeah. And then another thing that you were talking before about using the weapons training. And for me, I've never, I'm usually very averse to anything that has any weapon. But I think that there is a lot of suppressed anger in women, maybe even ancestrally and collectively, that perhaps doing some kind of weapons training like this, not to hurt anyone, but just to learn how to work with something to release a safe way to release some of this energy is do you think that that makes sense or
So my personal kind of paradigm, and for example, I have 3 daughters, right? So they're all getting this. And now fortunately they all like it, right? So
okay.
I'm not dragging anybody kicking and screaming to train, but they need to understand that the first sort of foundation and this is my setup for myself. All right. So we modified a little bit because some people not agree with me, but is you have to have a sort of a self protection system in some fashion before you can have a self perfection system, right? So if you can't take care of yourself, and this is sort of a broader conversation, but that includes a proper diet, that includes obviously some kind of not even martial arts, but fitness, right? Some just base level, you should be relatively fit to exist as a human being, right? My kids have made mention because we're very much Disney people, right? So we go to the parks and do these things. But at the park, you see a lot more every year, more people on the little strollers, or they can't walk, so
Mhm.
so
Yeah, yeah.
what you're seeing is the world is changing, and I don't want to judge anybody not knowing their status and what's going on with them, but they're not taking care of the self-preservation aspect of things, right?
Mhm.
So
Yep.
if you're not preserving what you've got, if you're not protecting what you've got, then self-perfection is a challenge. Now we live in an era where we're relative if we're depending on where we are, right? I live in a place where we're relatively safe day to day. I don't live in a place that's being bombed. I don't live in a place that's being starved out. I don't live in a place where I can't imagine that kind of day-to-day self-preservation is doesn't exist for me, right?
Yeah.
But we can
It's
also
different.
become
Yeah.
complacent with that, right? So we need
Mhm.
to challenge ourselves to build ourselves up so we don't get lazy and rely on things. So we know that when the tough times come, whether it's mentally, physically, spiritually, whatever, we can maintain. So having a baseline level of fitness, having a decent diet, taking care of your health, and anything from just making sure you're brushing your teeth, all those things. To me, that's under the self-preservation category, and martial arts is a big part of that, right? If you can't defend yourself in some fashion, there may be even psychologically what if in the back of your mind, right? Now, historically, especially in the Filipino martial arts, you see a lot of things in Chinese martial arts. Women are training all the time, right? So I think there are some cultural differences
Mm.
that where in certain cultures, it's more commonplace for a woman to be training and taking this seriously than not. Now, the living here in the United States, the kind of the cool thing is with jujitsu and also in middle school, high school wrestling, the girls wrestling programs have just exploded over here. Which means there are a whole group of women that are becoming tougher, right? They're going to
Mhm.
handle life better because they're confident they can handle themselves. Now, one of the things about, like, for example, in the weapons in the Filipino martial arts, aside from it just being lots of fun, right? And that's where I usually want people to enter into it. Because if you have fun, you'll do it more, right? So
Mhm.
I want everything to be fun, enjoyable. I don't get into the, yes, you're cutting this person here and for these reasons. The icky part, you need to understand it, but you won't practice it day to day if you're not having fun, right?
Right.
Everybody will give up something that they don't have value and it's not enjoyable for them. So I find the Filipino martial arts to be great because there's a lot of diversity to it. There's a lot of practical benefit to it. You have fun in developing skills that will protect you. Sometimes you go to self-defense classes and it can be gruesome, right? Oh, you've got to poke the guy here and kick him here and do these things. And those are important conversations to have, right? But the day to day, that's why a kickboxing class can be fun. You're developing the skills, but in an environment which is enjoyable. You're having fun. You're hitting the bag. You're working out. You're releasing stress, but you're developing skills that will, hopefully not, but in certain situations, protect your life, right?
Mhm.
Because there are weapons also make a great equalizer, right? If you're not the bigger person, right, that can be a problem. Especially for me in my involvement with Philippine martial arts, we work a lot with two sticks, right? Two sticks or
Mhm.
with stuff that you're never going to get your hands on in real life. But if you understand the art a little more deeply, you'll understand you could have a ballpoint pen in your hand, right? You could pick up anything. Like obviously if you were in a kitchen, you'd have all kinds of options. But even something like
Yeah.
a ballpoint pen, a stapler, or just getting something in your hand and you
Mhm.
knowing how to use that in a practical way to defend yourself is important. Because in this particular, the way I learned the Philippine martial arts, it's weapons first, empty hands second. Where most martial arts you see, they put on the uniform, looks really good. They learn to punch and kick and do those things. And then after they get their black belt, they learn all the weapons associated with their particular art. It's backwards in the
Mm.
Filipino martial because if push comes to shove, as it were, you want something in their hand. You want to be the person with the weapon. Now we've gone from this is still in the self-preservation category, right?
Mhm.
So, but the self perfection category is you have fun. You get to train with your friends. You do all the drills. There's a bunch of weapon categories that have nothing to do with self defense in a modern context, but they're a lot of fun, right? Now, can we make the argument that they will enhance your self defense skills? Yeah, sure. Okay, I guess. But if somebody were to attack you in such a way, you don't really need a lot of that training. You need a few simple skills to get yourself to a place that you're safe, right? But the more deeply you get into the art, the more skills you refine, the more likely you are to be able to defend yourself, but recognize the situation to avoid, right? I understand training. I understand people. I understand movement. Maybe I don't want to stand next to that guy, or maybe I don't
Mhm.
want to go down this place, right?
Yeah.
This is just a personal thing for me, but I don't drink because I don't want to I don't want to not be able to pay attention, right? And that's just me. But maybe I don't want to go to the club where I don't know people. What are the self-defense, self-preservation kind of skills that I want to have? And if all of those things fail and something happens, the fallback is always the physical, right?
Mhm.
But if you've trained it, even though you're training it for fun, but you're still acquiring the skills, you're increasing the odds that you're going to do something, right? Whether it's
Mhm.
jujitsu, whether it's Filipino martial arts, whatever those things are, right? Long term, unless you have to fight every day just for survival, long term, it should be enjoyment, right? The art
Mhm.
fun to do, enjoy it, train with your partners, have friends, have community, and just have a blast, right?
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
it's a better way to live anyway.
Yeah. And you also started to talk about the breath and the regulation and can you go into a little bit about using the martial arts for nervous system regulation because it's a big issue nowadays. Also, you
Sure, sure.
mentioned, one of it is that, yeah, we're becoming lazier, so to speak, that we have a lot more things that are convenient and we're losing access in a way to our mobility, to our power, And another thing is we're losing access to the ability to self-regulate, to calm down in a way the nervous system and come back to a centered state. Tell me about your
Sure.
experience with that.
So we have as human beings, we have no shortage of traditions for self-regulation, for breath work, for focus, health and wellness. So some of these are seemingly esoteric because, like, if you think of yoga and you think of pranayama, that's sort of a built-in structure.
Mhm.
but you can find it almost anywhere at any time if you delve deep into breath work. Now, what's happened is I think we kind of have two camps very broadly of human beings. Those are relying on external to fix their problems, taking the drugs, taking the medicines, riding on the scooters, doing those kind of things. Because it's, how do I phrase it? Because it takes a little bit more work to be the other person was, I'm going to take responsibility for my state of being moment by moment. That's more work. And some people don't want to do the work. And some people, and if you're incapable of doing the work in broad strokes, but you're willing to do small things, more power to you. And that those are conversations we can have. But a lot of people just like, nope, I'm going to take the drugs. I know the doctor said lose weight, so I'm going to take Ozempic. They said this, so I'm going to take that. The funny thing is, though, this is built into the human consciousness. Native American cultures have all kinds of breath work. They have all kinds of ritualistic practices. They have all kinds of herbs, or all kinds of things. It's all there, but you got to make more of an effort to do it, right? Now, the
Mhm.
neat thing in martial arts training, and especially for me, the way it came to me was through the kung fu practice, right? So in the forms itself, we have the physical, with in Chinese terms, we would say the negong and the hegong. So the seated practice where you focus on putting the tongue in the soft palate. Many people have maybe done deep abdominal breathing, right? So if you get into that and you're just sitting at the edge of the chair, so we practice the breathing for a little bit. Maybe depending on the teachers, there'll be some focal exercises. One of my teachers used to say, stare at the tip of your nose when do these
Mhm.
different things just to get you to focus on certain things.
Yeah.
Work your deep abdominal breathing and then work your form separate, right? Learn the mechanics. What is this move? What is that move? And then start to link them together. And certain forms move at a certain pace because it requires a certain breath work. Right. So in the Wing Chun form, the first form that we do, it's in 3 parts. Now, the first part is very slow motion. And you know that you're kind of integrating it because your breath takes longer to exhale and you're moving even more slowly, right? So you go slower and slower. So if your breath is 2 beats long and your motion is 2 beats, great. That's where you're at. But as you learn to control the breath and then you control the movement at the same time, right? You're linking it, and the whole point is to go slower, right? The whole point is for that takes 5, 6 beats, and then you exhale, and then you inhale, and you're going as slowly as you can, but as relaxed as you can, because you've learned to open up your diaphragm. You've learned to let the connective tissue expand, and the muscle is only there to sort of guide what you're doing, right? Then in part two, it's dynamic. So it's short, crisp, the movement is fast, and then you might be doing 4 or 5 moves in rapid succession. But and this is also in practical terms, you're exhaling short and crisp because it more symbolizes the kind of breath work under anxiety, right?
Mhm.
If I'm running away from something, if I'm hitting somebody, the mountain lion is attacking kind of situation. This is the in our flight or fight kind of analogy, right? So you have one that is preparatory. I learned to breathe. I learned to control. I learned to calm myself. We call the first form Siu Nim Tao, which means a little imagination. But a more interesting translation of those terms is diminishing thought in the mind, or meditation, right? So I
Mhm.
want to connect. I want to feel how my body's moving. I want to feel that with the breath. I want to feel the energy through the fingertips, and less whatever noise is happening. So the more time you spend doing that, the easier it is. And my point is to get to it in one breath, right? So when I do a form, I don't want to take 20 minutes just to get to a lower my vagus, reset my vagus. That's too long, because in real life, when you're at the final, you're at the DMV or you're at some place you don't want to be, and everybody's pissed off and everybody's angry. You need to be able to, in one breath, reset, right?
Yeah.
Because I do martial arts, in a combative situation, if something happens, you maybe got one breath to get ready to go, right? I don't in a martial arts competition, I get there several hours early. We're warming up, my team's around, we're having fun. You got all day to get ready for the 5 minutes that you're going to compete, 10 minutes that you're going to compete. But if somebody attacks you, you need to be prepared to up the energy for a brief amount of time. On an instant, same thing goes the other way. You need to be able
Mhm.
to calm yourself, get to a place of mental focus where you don't have that. To me, it's like, like the TV, that static when you get the white noise, static electricity energy, it's just in your brain. You can't think. We need to be able to calm that, right?
Hmm.
And as you practice more, could be the yoga practice. We have a lot of breath work we do in the Indonesian Silat. The whole point of it is you do your tens and hundreds and thousands of repetitions of practice, and you're really deeply engaged with that so that you can do it under pressure in a breath, right? Something's going on. My girls are arguing. My son's being a knucklehead. I can't respond from that energy up here. I have to take it down, and then I can respond effectively, right?
Hmm.
But as we said before, it takes a certain effort, right? In our tradition, what we call kung fu is not really martial arts per se. It's just anything that takes time and effort to acquire, right? So cooking could be kung fu, however you want to use the term. But that's a big one, right? That's a big kind of thing is, can you, at a drop of a hat, lower yourself and get to an effective state? Or somebody's coming for you, they grab your wallet, they do whatever. Do you have to turn up the dial and deal with it the other way, right?
Hmm.
All that takes
Yeah.
time and energy, right? You need, and by that I mean 5-10 minutes a day, right? Now, if you want
Okay.
to, train hours a day, that's cool, right? But most people don't have that. We have to find what is effectively going to get us there, right?
Mm.
But the systems
Well,
are built in to include the breath work, the focus. And fortunately, and it's been around forever, but right now, your breathology and all the breathing, it's kind of a popular thing, but it's been around forever, right? We just
of
haven't paid
course.
attention to it, right?
We just, we're a forgetful lot.
We tend
We
to
get
be.
excited and distracted by the new things, by the death
Mhm.
scrolls, so to speak. Yeah, and can you share, like, you mentioned, 5, maybe there's, like, 5 essential exercises that everyone should do every day. What are those exercises?
So what I'll try to do is I'll make sure that depending on who I'm dealing with, right? I'll take a look. So we usually, if we're working together, let's do an assessment of some kind. Tell me about yourself, right? What do you do? And it's in your interest to be as honest as possible. I say this kind of glibly, but I don't really care, right? And like, if you drink, if you smoke, that's your business. I will tell you not to, but you're going to listen to me or you're not, right? So we'll take an assessment. What are the things that you should do based on, I need to know where you're at so that I know and where you want to go. So I can sort of, all I can do is sort of point out some paths,
Mm,
right? You're
mhm.
going far to the left. Let's get you back to the center of the path, or I can make some pointers, right?
Well,
As
let's take, for example, someone like me. I don't
Mhm.
drink, and what was the other thing that you said?
Well,
I don't
like
know. Anyway.
the big ones, drinking, smoking. Are you
Yeah, I don't
sedentary?
smoke. Yeah.
Right.
But there, okay, sedentary, right? I work a lot on the computer. Even, I'm a doctor. Even when I'm seeing patients, I'm still sitting down. Maybe, I stand up, I do endoscopy because I'm a gastroenterologist. But there's not that much physical activity in my day-to-day life. I love to go out for nature walks, and I do that. I'm very lucky. I'm right by the forest, and I can do that. But what else should I be doing? What else should I be incorporating? Because I feel like I'm midlife, and I need to up the ante a little bit. And honestly, yeah, I've done yoga for many years in my life, and it's get a little bored of it. So, what else would you recommend?
So first, what I would say is, if the diet is relatively in good shape, I
Hmm.
usually we can talk about how we would do that. But if the diet and the hydration is pretty much in a good shape, you're doing some kind of exercise, but you want to transition to something else, that's fine. So diet, exercise, some kind of mental stimulation, right? If you're a Sudoku person, if you're a reader, something that gets you off a screen and into your own brain. If you're a painter, if if you like to do pottery, I don't know, pick something, right? I like, for example, my other side of things, my wife and I met dancing, and I proposed to her in Buenos Aires. We used to do tango and stuff when we can. But a part of related to all the musical stuff is I will use drumming, like Afro-Cuban drumming, as my brain work, right?
Hmm.
Good at it, but it's something I can do. And it's something that I need to work on. So some mental stimulation, and then what we want to do is find some micro workouts that you can do. You may have even seen, like, doing the soleus raises, the calf raises, while you're sitting in your chair, right? You do sit,
Hmm.
you do a couple sets of 30 a day, right? A lot of this is goal dependent, right? If people that are perhaps a little more sedentary and they're not doing any exercise at all, I would say You start with your 5 minutes a day. Uh, we could do it by weeks, for example. You walk 5 minutes a day, every day, 5 days a week, and then you walk twice, once in the morning, once in the afternoon, or preferably after meals. You take a 5 minute walk, and that becomes a 10 minute walk. And then pretty soon you're getting a walking cycle. I think walking is the athletic achievement for any human being. You need to be able to walk for half an hour. It's sort of like we used to call it high intensity interval training. This is like a moderate one, but they call it the Japanese walking method. 3 minutes where you're kind of a low pace, and 3 minutes where you're just at that conversational threshold. That's cool, right? If you're in a place where you can't walk outside and you want to walk on a treadmill or something, I like that because you get the incline, decline changes and whatnot. All cool as well. When it's really hot and muggy and down in Florida where we live, and there's just mosquitoes everywhere, and my wife will not go outside. My wife refuses to go take an outside walk because of the mosquitoes. She's very
Yeah.
susceptible. So fine, we treadmill, doesn't matter. I think walking is the baseline human experience, right? You want to walk. Now, if you can up the ante and take the nature trails and hiking, that's even better. And I'd rather people be outside if possible. But then what are your micros? For example, if you really want to get somewhere full body, then you say, okay, I'm going to take 10 squats every hour, 10 body weight squats every hour, right? Depending on what you're trying to do, right? That's what I would need to know. Where we were, some in your case, you're already doing yoga and other things. Yep, invest in a martial arts class if that seems interesting to you, right? I would recommend, especially if the class has like a 1 week trial, or you do something, or take a tango class, take a salsa dancing class, right? Salsa being a little bit more on the quicker moving side. So you get, depending on the class, you get a little more exercise doing that. Those are really great ways, modalities, but introduce yourself to other things that you might connect with, right? I'm a little bit hesitant to say, do this because I teach it, or I'm a little hesitant to say, do this because I think it's cool, right? Because, next week you'll give it up, right? And then
Mm.
experiment with all of the different things and try to find the ones that are going to resonate with you. Some kind of movement every day, right? Worst case scenario, you're doing your calf raise, especially if somebody's really not in a place where they can even walk. One of the persons I was working with for quite a long time, we would do a set of calf raises on the day, and then she would stand up and just sit to her chair because she couldn't actually squat, right? Her knees didn't work. So we started with 5 every hour, just doing chair squats. You've seen those little the rubber finger extensors, right? You
Mhm.
do a couple sets of those to keep your hands mobile, right? When your hands start to cramp up, you have some problems, right? We have markers in the body that are telling us that we're decaying, we're degrading. If your hands hurt at the end of the day because you're typing all the time, or you're doing those things, the basic massaging of the hand towards the fingertips, right? The problem is we tend to, as human beings, we tend to sort of get to the point where, hey, I can do this, and then we stop, right? The thing is, consistency is the key. And if
Yeah.
we can find some things that we're willing to be consistent about, especially when we enjoy them, we have these conversations all the time. I have a client that said, okay, listen, get one of those under the bike little pedal things, right? It's under your desk. You pedal as you go, because I don't want to do a walking desk. I look like an idiot and blah, blah, blah. Like, okay, maybe that's not your thing, but the little pedal thing underneath.
Mm. Yeah, honestly, there's so many
Yeah.
things that it's, you
There's
have
no
no
excuse.
excuse. There's
Yeah.
no excuse,
There's
yeah,
no,
and really the important thing is to connect with our bodies, to be
yes.
in our bodies, right?
Right.
Because so much of what's going on in our lives
Mhm.
nowadays is disconnecting us from our body, right?
I think
Getting us to a
purposefully so, yes.
bodied state. Probably purposely. That's a conversation for another day, but yeah, definitely, and once you get into your body, you start to yeah, maybe at first you start to recognize that there are a lot of things that are uncomfortable and you have to deal with them, and some of those
Oh,
things
yeah.
may be emotional, but you know what? Ultimately, that's really for the best. The more you can get back into your
Mhm.
body and deal with all those old things that have been
Yeah,
suppressed,
for sure.
the better you'll feel, the healthier you'll be.
And it'll change.
Yeah.
I just had surgery, and about a week and a half ago, right? And it put me out, like, it was enough such that my walking right now that's the extent of my working out, right? Because it was it could not be helped. It was because of the mistakes I made and the lack of information I had in my poor technique when I was younger. I had hernia
Mm,
surgery. Now I'm stuck. If I had hair, I'd be pulling my hair out, right? Because this is just so not me. So I have to find things. I'm doing the calf raises when I'm sitting, right? I'm not so much squatting or do anything, but we're going on the walks. I got my little finger extensors and my little crusher tools. One of the markers that I use for people, especially as they age, is how is your grip, right? If you
mhm,
can maintain your grip in your forearm, if you can maintain your balance, for example, a great exercise, people don't even think about how good an exercise is, but start with 30 seconds, maybe less, just balance on one foot and then switch feet. Try that for 2 minutes a day, because whether you feel it or not, everybody's balance, especially as they age, you want to prevent falling. That's
yeah.
kind of the thing. And walking with intention. That's why I think walking is the primary skill to develop. And then if you want to run, cool. I'm not, I kind of like once or twice a week, I like to do sprints, but I'm not a jogging kind of person, just doesn't suit me.
Mm.
But find something like that. That's the core human skill, and then go from there. I think yoga is great. We have our own stuff in jujitsu and other things that is like yoga adjacent.
Mhm.
So I'm really a big fan of that. But pay attention to all the little things, right? That you can do when you're sitting around. And I I think breath work in 2, 3, 5 minute bursts throughout the day. I mean, you go to YouTube, look up breath work tutorial. I mean,
There's so many. Yeah,
if you're
absolutely.
a
There's
box
no
breathing kind
excuse.
of person, you set your alarm and you do that, do like a 3 minute box breathing. But if you space it out a couple times, then what'll happen is you're introducing themes, and then maybe one of those themes is going to really connect with you. And then you can choose to go deeper in that thing, right? I think that's a lot of fun.
This is a really nice conversation about body work and martial arts in a way that I wasn't familiar with, and I really appreciate, what you've shared, Chris. How can
My
people get
pleasure.
in touch with you if they wanna work with you or just to get more information?
Yeah, so on the socials, Coach Chris Mulgeri. The easiest way is probably through the website, thesynergycenter.net. That's where everything's happening right now. We're in a sort of a rebuilding phase, not only the physical location that we're working to open up down here in Florida, but more services stuff online. So it's kind of like a relaunch of what we're doing. So there will be a lot more coming very, very soon.
Wonderful. Good. I look forward to it. Well, thank you
Excellent.
again.
Thank you for
Yeah.
having me.
Thank you. And if you've enjoyed this conversation, please send us some information on the comments section. We'd love to hear your thoughts, any practices that you take part in, or any questions that you have for Chris about any of the techniques that he's mentioned. Love to hear from you. Thank you.